Alright, hey guys, welcome back to Hollow Space. I've been collecting games the majority of my life, and I have around 1,500 games in my collection. I play pretty much everything, and I like every console, but the one that I love the most is PlayStation. This entire wall back here is all PlayStation games, the only exception being my Nintendo handhelds up here. I love how those look too much to pretty much ever change that. Today I'm going to be giving you an overview of my entire collection and showing you which games I love the most. I will be doing more in-depth videos of each individual system at a later date, but for now let's take a look at this entire shelf. This whole collection is placed on billy shelves from IKEA. The games are pushed forward on the shelves using extra shelf boards that I cut in half, and I love the way it makes them pop out and gives easier access to everything. The three shelves are organized in a way that one shelf is entirely PS3, which is my largest PlayStation collection with a little over 300 games. The middle shelf has my PS4 and handheld game collection, and the last one is PS1, PS2, PS5, PSP, and an extra shelf that holds what I would consider to be my favorite PlayStation games. At the top of all the shelves are various collector's editions and big box games that I've collected over the years, so that's what I'm going to start with. At the very top is the collector's edition for Deus Ex Mankind Divided with an Adam Jensen figure. I hate that the new Deus Ex game was cancelled, as I was really looking forward to it.
I never asked for this.
Below that is the box for Final Fantasy XIV and Walker, the game that I have played more than any other and one of my favorite games of all time. I have over 7,000 hours of playtime in FF14, and I never run out of things to do. The people I've met playing this game and everything I've done have been some of the best experiences I've ever had playing a video game.
And so they came, at a friend's behest.
Next to FF14, we have the Jumino from Stardew Valley, and this Vault Boy is in front of a box of posters from Persona 4, and a Luden's keychain from Death Stranding. At the top is the premium edition of Yakuza 6 and the collector's edition of Unravel, and below that is the NieR Replicant White Snow edition, which I showed before in my NieR collection video, as well as Persona 5 Royal and Psychopath's Mandatory Happiness behind the Shovel Knight amiibo. Here's the collector's edition for The Last Guardian, and on top of that are some big boxes for games like No More Heroes and Ys Origin, along with Nex Machina and I the Somnium Files, with a Metroid sitting on top of them. This is the collector's edition for Resident Evil 8, and above that is Assassin's Creed 2, which was the first collector's edition that I ever bought. At the top is a box for the PlayStation TV, and next to it is the Fallout 4 Pip-Boy box, which is behind the box for an extremely underrated platform game, The Grinch.
I have a great idea. This year, the Who's will pay.
Next to that is Ni no Kuni 2, and above is the Elden Ring Collector's Edition. This is one of my recent favorite PS5 games, Haven, along with Zone of the Enders and this huge box for Death Stranding behind them. Getting into the PS3 games, sitting on the top of the shelf we have my favorite PC game, LEGO Rock Raiders, which recently got an amazing full remake called Manic Miners that you can play for free, that really felt like it completed the game and added so much more that wasn't in the original game. Next to that is the collector's edition of River City Girls for the PS5, and beside that is the solid gold edition for Persona 4 with some acrylic stands of Marie, along with the Take Your Heart edition of Persona 5. In this first row of games, we have 3D Dot Game Heroes, all the Assassin's Creed games, the BioShock games, Borderlands, and the Castlevania Lords of Shadow games, and at the end is Catherine, which is one of my favorite games from the PS3 era. Catherine! On the next shelf, there's an Ace Attorney Objection keychain, and we're starting to get into some horror games. Starting with Condemned 2 Bloodshot, and later on the shelf there's Dead Space 3, Deadly Premonition, and Dead Rising 2. Deus Ex Human Revolution is a game that I really loved from this era. This DMC is actually signed by Combat Christ, who did some music for the game. Fallout 3 and New Vegas and the Fear trilogy are games that I played a lot on the PS3. This necklace is from Haven, and here is the Love Is Over edition of Catherine, before getting into the next row of games with some amiibos on top. On this side is Charizard, Ivysaur, and Squirtle, and on the other side is the Piranha Plant along with Bowser and Bowser Jr. In this row we have the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy, which I love a lot, as well as Folklore, God of War 3, Ascension, the PSP collection, the Ico and Shadow of the Colossus collection, the infamous games Journey, Katamari Forever, and Killer is Dead. Speaking of Katamari, here's a plush of the Prince. This next row of games has a lot of games that I like, such as Little Big Planet 1 and 2, Lollipop Chainsaw, Metal Gear Rising, NieR Gestalt, the Ninja Gaiden games, No More Heroes, the One Piece Pirate Warriors games, as well as Persona 4 Arena. The next shelf has Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, more horror games like Resident Evil 5 and 6, the Saw games, and Silent Hill Homecoming, Downpour, and the HD collection of Silent Hill 2 and 3, as well as Shadows of the Damned and the Sly Cooper games. This shelf is the end of my PS3 collection, with games like Twisted Metal, Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, Under Defeat HD, and Zone of the Enders. And here's a rubber duck of Kiryu from Yakuza. This bottom shelf just has some of my consoles, 2 of my PSPs, my Super Nintendo and original Xbox, as well as the Wii U. That's everything for the PS3 collection. Moving on to the middle, the top of the shelf are the only non-PlayStation things on this wall. All of my Nintendo handhelds that I will quickly go over, starting with my DS collection, with all of the Ace Attorney games, the Bleach games, Pokemon, Rhythm Heaven, and Tenchu, as well as the big boxes for Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Next is my PlayStation Vita collection. The Vita is so underrated and has lots of great games, like the 4 Danganronpa games, Octodad, Gravity Rush, Persona 4 Golden and Persona 4 Dancing All Night, Silent Hill Book of Memories, Steins Gate and Steins Gate Zero, Touch My Katamari, and Valhalla. Next to them are my box of Game Boy games that include things like Castlevania Curse of the Moon, Metroid Fusion, all 4 of the Super Mario Advance games, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is definitely something that I want to collect more of in the future. The next shelf is my 3DS collection, which I will quickly go over. It has games like the ports of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, the Monster Hunter games, and lots of great RPGs like the Shin Megami Tensei games, Radiant Historia, and the Persona Q games. The main part of the shelf is my PlayStation 4 collection. I have a lot of fond memories of the PS4 era, and one of the best PS4 games, Bloodborne, you will see later on my favorite shelf.
Welcome home, good hunter. What is it you desire?
This row of games has lots of things I like, such as 13 Sentinels, Agony, the Batman Arkham and BioShock collections, all 3 of the Bloodstained games, Caladrius Blaze, and Cyberpunk 2077. At the end of the shelf is the box for Catherine Full Body. Getting into this lower shelf, there are some big boxes for 3DS games that didn't fit anywhere else, as well as some extra cases for Pokemon games. This row of games has all 3 of the Dark Souls games, Devil May Cry 1 through 5, Doom and Doom Eternal, The Evil Within 1 and 2, Fatal Frame 5, and a ton of Final Fantasy games such as FF7, 10, 12, and 3 of my copies of FF14. The next shelf continues Final Fantasy with FF15, and next is God of War 4, and my favorite PlayStation series Gravity Rush 1 and 2, which I will be making a full video of my collection in the future. There's also some anime games like Danmachi, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Eyes of Heaven, and Jump Force, as well as the Kingdom Hearts games. This shelf has 2 Monster Hunter Worlds because my wife and I play that game to death.
Where's my Dragonator?
Ready when you are.
Good. Fire!
Next are NieR Replicant and Automata, more of my favorite games. Most of the One Piece PS4 games are here, as well as all of the Persona games from Persona 3 through 5 and the dancing games. On the next shelf are all of the Resident Evil games. I love how they all got physical copies for the PS4. Here's the Secret of Mana remake and some of the Senran Kagura games in big boxes, and Signalis, another excellent horror game. On the top of the last PS4 shelf are some amiibos of Link and a Guardian, and a sealed copy of LEGO Rock Raiders. Last shelf has Tetris Effect, an amazing game from the creator of Rez, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, probably my favorite fighting game, and all 3 of the Zero Escape games at the very end. Next to the games are my PS Vita and one of my GameCubes, and that's the end of the PS4 shelf. I don't really keep count of my games very much anymore, but I think I'm getting close to 300 PS4 games, and it's the second largest collection I have behind the PS3. The final shelf is a mix of many PlayStation console generations, and is probably the shelf I like the most of the 3. Everything from PS1, PS2, PSP, PS5, as well as my favorite PlayStation games are here. At the top is a sheep from Catherine Full Body, sitting next to a figure of Sephiroth. Next to Sephiroth we have the members of Avalanche, Aerith, Tifa, Cloud, Barret, and Solid Snake. There's a stack of memory cards here, and the start of my PSP collection with the 3rd birthday and Armored Core. I'm running out of space on this shelf, but to start we have Assassin's Creed Bloodlines and Crisis Core, the Death Jr. games, Lumines 1 and 2, Katamari, the Metal Gear games, some of the Monster Hunter games, and then we have Silent Hill Origins, and 4 games from a series I love a whole lot, Tenchu. These are import copies of the PSP versions of Tenchu 3 and Kurenai that didn't come out here. Next to the PSP is the entire Yakuza series, starting with Yakuza 1 and 2 on the PS2, all of the PS3 through PS5 games, and ending with Judgment, Lost Judgment, Like a Dragon Gaiden, and Infinite Wealth. Yakuza is one of my top game series, and I felt like it deserved a special place in my collection where I can have all of the games together. This next shelf is most of my PlayStation 5 collection. For a new console, the PS5 already has a ton of really good games, like the Dead Space remake, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Elden Ring, and the Final Fantasy VII remake games. Kena Bridge of Spirits was an early PS5 game that I like a lot, as well as Resident Evil Village. Next to that we have the River City Girls games and the entire Shantae box set, as well as one of my recent favorite PS5 games, Stellar Blade. The last 2 PlayStation 5 games down here are Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge and Tormented Souls, before leading into my entire PS1 collection. There's a bunch of Mario figures on top of my PS1 games. Toad is surrounded by a bunch of boos and Shy Guys. Over here is Mario, Luigi, and Yoshi. And here's the most depressing figure I've ever seen of Pikachu crying over his spilled ice cream cone. Down here is a really cool replica of a Pokeball that comes with a light-up stand, as well as a keychain of lightning from Final Fantasy XIII, and some figures of Kiryu and Majima from Yakuza.
Yo.
The first game that stands out in my PS1 collection is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Then there's the Duke Nukem games, and the Final Fantasy games that were released on PS1. I'm playing Final Fantasy IX right now, and I love everything about this game. Then there's the PS1 version of The Grinch, which I have played so many times, along with Irritating Stick, a really interesting Japanese game show type game, which gets really challenging. The PS1 version of Rock Raiders is here, which isn't as good as the PC version, and the Parasite Eve games along with Resident Evil 2 and Silent Hill 1 are also here, along with Tenchu 1 and 2 and Twisted Metal 2. This shelf is what I would consider to be my favorite PlayStation games. I'm always moving these around and updating which games go here, but this is everything that's here right now. There's a lot more I want to put on here, but I wanted to limit it to a single shelf to keep my game collection organized, so a lot of thought goes into which ones get put on here. The first game is Alice Madness Returns. I'm a huge fan of American McGee's games, and this was the first one that I played. I was pretty disappointed that Alice Asylum didn't work out. It's been a long time since we've got a new Bleach game, and I'm really nostalgic for Soul Resurrection. I'm a big fan of Rez, and Child of Eden was an excellent spiritual successor that doesn't get talked about enough. Dead Space 1 and 2 are some of my favorite horror games. Devil May Cry 4 is one of the PS3 era games I played the most, and I have a huge attachment to it. Drakengard 3 is an amazing game from Yoko Taro that really needs a remaster. I hope it gets one someday. This is a custom steelbook for the original NieR, which was my introduction to the NieR series. I'm a huge fan of most of Valve's games, and I especially love Half-Life, Portal, and Team Fortress 2. The first PS4 game on here is a collection of the first 3 Ace Attorney games. Next is Bloodborne, one of the PS4 games I played the most. Bloodstain and Catherine are games that I really like a lot. Devil May Cry 5 was the most excited I've ever been for a new game coming out. I beat it in a single sitting, and it's become one of my favorite games in the Devil May Cry series. After that are Elden Ring and the FF7 remake, and my most played game ever, Final Fantasy XIV. I love all the Final Fantasy games and have FF15 and 16 here as well. These are custom steelbooks for Gravity Rush 1 and 2, which are my favorite PlayStation games. And next to it is Haven, which is a newer game that I like a lot, as well as The Last Guardian. Little Nightmares 1 and 2 are more of my favorite horror games. And Lost Judgment is one of my favorite games in the Yakuza series. Monster Hunter World was the game that I played the most before FF14, and I can't wait for Wilds next year. NieR Replicant and Automata are some of the best games I've ever played. Persona 4 Golden is my personal favorite of the Persona series, and Resident Evil 2 Remake was amazing. The last 3 PS4 games are Shadow of the Colossus, Stardew Valley, and Valhalla, which I made a video on showing my whole collection already. Getting into the PS2 games, we have Devil May Cry 3, Drakengard 1, and God Hand, an amazing beat-em-up that I play all the time. Half-Life 1 and Haunting Ground, as well as Ego and Katamari Damacy, are all PS2 games that I love. Kuon is a game from Software that I always have been a huge fan of. A great horror game with visuals that remind me a lot of my favorite PS2 games, Tenchu. Rez is on here along with Rule of Rose, a PS2 game that I feel very lucky to own. Silent Hill 2 is up here along with what might be my favorite in the series, Silent Hill 3. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a really great beat-em-up that I've played more than most PS2 games. And at the end are my 2 favorites, Tenchu Wrath of Heaven and Fatal Shadows. One game that I would love to add to my favorite shelf when I can get a physical copy of is Baldur's Gate 3, which I have been playing non-stop recently.
Truly? But you have seen my hamster, yes? And Boo, meet you?
The last games on the shelf are my PS2 games. The PS2 was the first PlayStation console that I ever got when I was a kid. The Baldur's Gate and Castlevania games are at the start, and this game without a spine is City Crisis. Then there's the rest of the Devil May Cry games, and most of the Dragon Ball games, as well as Drakengard 2 and the Fatal Frame series, and more Final Fantasy and God of War. This next shelf has Killer 7, the Kingdom Hearts games, Klonoa, as well as the Lord of the Rings games, Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, the original Monster Hunter, a lot of the Naruto games, Nightshade, Okami, Okage, as well as the One Piece Grand Battle games. On the next shelf are Persona 3 FES and Persona 4, as well as this big box for the original Persona 3. Then there's the Rayman games, Red Ninja, more of the Resident Evil games, Silent Hill 4 and Siren, as well as the Sly Cooper games, which I wish would get a new game. The bottom shelf has a lot of the Star Wars games, the Tony Hawk games, Twisted Metal Black, Beautiful Joe 1 and 2, We Love Katamari, and some of the Wild Arms games, as well as Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelists of the Roses. That does it for this overview of my entire PlayStation collection, and I will be making more in-depth videos showing individual collections for each console at some point, but this was meant to be a quick showcase of some of the PlayStation games that I like and have played the most. I almost forgot to show this rogue shelf over here that has some of my bigger boxed games that don't fit on the main PlayStation shelf. There's lots of great games on here like Persona, A Rose in the Twilight, Shadow of the Colossus and Eco, and Deus Ex, and below that is Killer is Dead, Final Fantasy VII and 16, as well as Kingdom Hearts 3. This shelf has Little Nightmares, Shin Megami Tensei, and Anno Mutationum, a really great cyberpunk game. This shelf is mostly Persona and Kingdom Hearts, and the bottom is Duke Nukem Forever and Streets of Rage 4. And with that, this collection showcase is concluded. If you stuck around until the end of this video, then tell me, what are some of your favorite PlayStation games? Let me know if I mentioned one of your favorite games in the comments below so we can talk about them, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching, and this has been Hollow Space.